Hi, welcome to PN Recapped Mystery. Today we explain Prince Caspian movie. On a cloudless nighttime in Narnia, below an eclipse of its moon, internal a darkish and forbidding castle, the Lady Protectress Pruna Prismina gives birth to a son. Down the hallway, General Glazelle brings this glad information to Pruna Prismina's husband, Lord Protector Miraz. Miraz then tells Glazelle to comply with an advance orders, to kill younger Prince Caspian, the rightful king of Narnia, 10th in line from Caspian I, who first led his Telmarine forces to invade and triumph over Narnia, loads of years before, but Caspian loyal associate degree devoted professor, Dr. Cornelius, won't permit that to happen. He rouses Caspian from his sleep and hustles him into his press the back of that opens to a secret passageway. Even as Caspian closes the armoire door behind him, Glazelle enters, with many men armed with crossbows, who then discharge their crossbows into Caspian's empty bed, and succeed solely in filling the air with goose feathers. When which, Cornelius hastily assists Caspian to decorate for a long ride, along with his brand buckled on. The final thing that Cornelius offers Caspian is associate degree ornate ivory horn, with the recommendation to blow it solely at an hour of dire need and that everything you recognize is on the brink of change. Caspian escapes the palace and rides into the unsteady woods, with Glazelle and his summary execution a detail in hot pursuit. As Cornelius told him to expect, Caspian pursuers don't care to follow him into the unsteady woods at night. Caspian then falls off his horse when colliding with an overhanging tree limb, and is ready upon by two creatures, the character of that he doesn't instantly recognize, dwarves, one red-headed and one dark-haired. As they approach, the redhead sees Glazelle detail, attracts his sword, and rushes to fulfill them, telling his mate to take care of him. Because the dark-haired dwarf approaches, Caspian grabs the horn and blows a long, loud note before the dwarf knocks him senseless, but the depart that horn carries across the dimensions to 1942 London, wherever Susan Pevensey is attempting to avoid a boy who is trying to strike up a conversation, once her sister Lucy summons her to the Strand Underground station. Inside, on the platform, Peter has gotten into yet one more pointless fight, and shortly his brother Edmund leaps into the fray to come back to Peter's aid, before two home guardsmen arrive, whistles blasting, roaring at everybody to break it up, and act your age. Because the four sit down along on a platform bench, Peter complains bitterly concerning being treated sort of a kid he who had been a high king as recently as a year before. Edmund reminds him that they're kids. Associated Susan has simply told him that they have to be compelled to reconcile themselves to a life in England when Lucy cries out, fretful that one thing has pinched her. And Peter and Edmund suspect one another of pinching one another. Suddenly Susan realizes that magic is at work. All of them hold hands and as an underground train passes, the terribly walls of the underground tube flake away so dissolve. Effort the four standing, not in a very tube train station, however in a shallow cavern close to a sandy beach below a sunstruck sky. The children chuck off the outer coats of their college uniforms and play within the shallow water and then Edmund wonders wherever they're. Peter is assured that they are back in Narnia, however Edmund doesn't recall that Narnia had ruins in it. He's trying up at the apparent ruins of a castle engineered high on a foreland dominating the beach. The youngsters climb the promontory and investigate the ruins and finally all of them notice that these are the ruins of Cair Paravel, where once that they had reigned collectively when fighting a serious battle. Back at the Telmarine castle, Glazelle and his troops come back from a sortie with a body draped over a horse. Miraz is raring to verify the death of Caspian. However Glazelle stops him and shows him that he has brought back. Back at the Telmarine castle, Glazelle and his troops come back from a sortie with a body draped over a horse. Miraz is raring to verify the death of Caspian. However Glazelle stops him and shows him that he has brought back, not the body of Caspian, but a creature of a completely totally different order, the red-headed dwarf who had challenged Glazelle, on foot and armed solely with a arm, within the unsteady woods. An resentful council session begins with Lord Sepespian's insistence that Miraz isn't a person to be trusted. Miraz walks in, apologizing for being late, and so takes some pointed accusations from Lords Sidley, Donnan, and Sepespian to the impact that Caspian is missing. on the terribly night that Miraz's son was born. Miraz answers with a straightforward scapegoat. Caspian, he says, has been kidnapped by Narnians. As proof, he orders Glazelle to guide within the Red Dwarf, certain and gagged, and then charges that the Narnians, whom all Telmarines had imagined to be extinct, are breeding steadily, awaiting a chance to attack the conquest Telmarines. Miraz then overtly swears to search out Caspian and finish what our ancestors began if he must curtail each tree within the unsteady wood.
Back at Cair Paravel, Edmund detects the signs of Associate Degree artillery barrage, the primary sign that Narnia was after all invaded, many years ago in Narnian time. The youngsters investigate further, and realize that the royal treasure area continues to be inviolate.
With the help of Edmund's new electrical torch, the Pevensies find 4 trunks containing all their royal costumes and their original weapons and alternative accoutrements, except that Susan Horn is missing. Lucy could be a very little unhappy as she realizes that each friend they'd on Narnia is currently laying dead. Peter buckles on his sword, takes up his silver defend with the Red Lion ramping up Associate Degreed facing the viewer, and announces that the 4 got to establish what has been happening on Narnia in what's currently clearly an absence of centuries. They don't have long to search. A tiny low wooden rowboat, rowed by 2 Telmarine troopers, comes right down to the mouth of the Nice River. Within is that the Red Dwarf, whom they're getting ready to throw into the water once suddenly an arrow buries itself in their boat. Associate Degree angry adult female, Susan, yells, "Drop him!" The soldiers throw the dwarf into the water, and as Peter and Edmund rush into the water to draw him out, Susan shoots one among the soldiers, inflicting the opposite to abandon their boat. The dwarf initially isn't terribly grateful to them until he realizes that he's after all addressing the kings and queens of old. By manner of demonstration, Peter permits the dwarf, named Trumpkin, to fight a brief bout with Edmund. Edmund takes a bit whereas to induce his SKLLS back, however handily disarms Trumpkin, so removing all doubt. "Maybe that horn worked once all," he says. Deep within the unsteady woods, Caspian wakes up and overhears the black-haired dwarf, named Nikabrik, and a talking badger named Truffle Hunter discussing his fate. Caspian tries to fight Nikabrik, however Truffle Hunter silences each of them and sedately asks Caspian to spot himself. That Caspian does. His story that he's effort from his uncle, who is perhaps nothing lower than a usurper, impresses Truffle Hunter. But doesn't impress Nikabrik nearly as much. Caspian prepares to leave, but Truffle Hunter stops him and informs him of truth nature of the ivory horn he was carrying. At the castle, Miraz angrily confronts Cornelius with the intense red arrow recovered from the body of one of his soldiers, and asks concerning Queen Susan Horn. Cornelius is aware of that his life is forfeit, but conjointly that Caspian has done specifically as Cornelius expected. Aloud, he reveals that the Narnians believed that it might summon the 4 kings and queens. Miraz, clearly not satisfied, orders Cornelius arrested, and Lord Sepespian, noticing, strikes up a candidly mutinous oral communication with Glazelle. However, Miraz doesn't offer Sepespian long enough to linger over such matters. He orders Glazelle to travel to Baruna, taking variety of troops with him, to strengthen Sepespian forces who are building a bridge spanning the good stream at that point. "We should realize Caspian before they do," says Miraz, who then tells Sepespian that he wants a history lesson. Trumpkin and also the 4 youngsters row upriver, as Trumpkin tells them that the trees ne'er talk anymore, that Aslan apparently abandoned them with the 4 children on the face of it did, which several of the talking beasts of Narnia don't savvy to speak anymore. In the unsteady woods, Caspian, Nikabrik and Truffle Hunter embarked on to seek out alternative Narnians. Truffle Hunter would a lot of liked that Caspian anticipate the recent kings and queens, however Caspian is in an exceedingly hurry. Then Truffle Hunter smells out a Telmarine search party, and also the 3 should endure their lives. However, before the Telmarines will kill them, they're killed themselves by a creature too small to ascertain that clearly strikes from below, with deadly Then this creature leaps out of the ferns that cow the bottom within the forest, bowls Caspian over, attracts a little sword, and shouts, "Choose your last words carefully, Telmarine." This creature is Reepicheep, who is really a mouse. Reepicheep is inclined to kill Caspian out of hand, however Truffle Hunter tells him to place away his weapon, as a result of Caspian is that the one who blew the horn, a revelation that offers Reepicheep pause. That's once a celebration of centaurs arrive, spoken communication that the horn is why they need gathered. At another a part of the forest, Peter insists on leading the party on a pathway that Trumpkin insists may be a dead end. In fact, he's trying to find a crossing that not exists because the watercourse rush has scoured for itself a ravine wherever a crossing once existed. Suddenly Lucy appears across the gorge, and spots Aslan, the leonine god king of Narnia. However, nobody will believe her, as a result of no one but she will be able to see Aslan. With one exception, Edmund is inclined to simply accept something that Lucy says because if last time I didn't believe Lucy, I complete up wanting pretty stupid. That night, Caspian confronts a gathering of associate degree Green Narnians who discussion whether or not to just accept Caspian as a friend, or kill him out of hand. Reepicheep unsparingly asks Nikabrik whether he remembers that his folks once fought beneath the command of the traditional White Witch. Nikabrik says that he would do so once more in preference to acceptive Telmarine rule, or perhaps an alliance. Trufflehunter scathingly tells Nikabrik that the opposite Narnians ought to be grateful that neither he nor anyone else will bring the White Witch back, then asks whether he would have Caspian flip against Aslan. That triggers another spherical of angry catcalling. Within the end, Caspian wins their favor by remarking that he's a rightful king, and may give birth to an enduring peace between Telmarines and Narnians. The lead centaur, Glenstorm, then tells the assembly that an astronomical conjunction has convinced him that the time is true for simply such an alliance as Caspian offers. With Trufflehunter, the centaurs, and Reepicheep and his Murine tribe to support him, Caspian gains the trust of the Minotaurs and different Narnian creatures and is acknowledged as their leader. The Pevensies and Trumpkin trip the fort of Baruna, however discover it occupied with a combat engineering crew, led by Sepespian and Glazelle. They're building a bridge, reducing several trees, and conjointly building 4 immense trebuchets. The implications are staggering and Susan suggests that this wouldn't be a decent place to cross once all. The 5 then come back to the spot wherever Lucy saw Aslan, and raise her to inform them exactly where she thought she saw him. Once Protestant their condescending attitude, Lucy short falls through a layer of loose ground cover to what seems to be the start of a shelf that they will use to figure their approach all the way down to the watercourse and cross it. Susan reveals that she had finally gotten wont to the concept of living in England, and also the transition is truly difficult mainly as a result of their expertise in Narnia won't last. The 2 women fall asleep but then Lucy, maybe during a dream, sees a live nymph, so sees Aslan, now standing abundant taller than he did before. Aslan tells her only, things ne'er happen in the same method twice. At that moment, somebody stepping on a twig awakens Lucy, who finds herself back in camp together with her brothers and sister. Then she sets out on her own, and thinks she sees Aslan again but Peter silences her and shows her that she has seen an armed Minotaur. Peter gets nearer to investigate and another young man attacks him with a sword. Before they will damage one another, Lucy cries intent on them to stop because she realizes that this man could be a friend, and is amid an outsized cluster of unmistakable Narnians. Surprisingly, they see centaurs, fauns, satyrs, minotaurs, badgers, and wolves all on constant side, whereas 1,300 years agone they'd been enemies and a brand new reasonably Narnian, talking mice. Then Peter realizes whom he talking to, Caspian, the Telmarine prince in exile. Currently Caspian, Peter, the opposite 3 Pevensies, Trufflehunter, Glenstorm, and Reepicheep, have a spherical of mutual introductions and therefore the beginnings of a war council. The united party, with several Narnians in tow, then sets out for his or her stronghold, Aslanhau, engineered atop associate traditional stone table site. At the bridge site, Miraz interrogates Glazelle when an unknown marauding party have purloined enough weapons and armor for 2 regiments, and left this message, "You were right to worry the woods." Miraz then effectively demands that Glazelle choose a variety of his men to possess dead for sleeping on watch, or no matter charge would justify the losses in materiel. Glazelle says that he can like 3 for that punishment. Miraz then announces that Caspian has turned renegade or, as we'd say, gone native and Narnia is in would like of a replacement king. Caspian, Peter, and their party reach Aslan however and take up residence there. passing underneath an arch of swords upheld by Glenstorm and his several sons and cousins. Susan and Lucy are most fascinated by another realize deep within the how, the first stone table, still in the cracked into condition during which they left it once Aslan was originally resurrected from the dead. There they see fresco portraits of the four of them, and of Aslan, but Peter, unimpressed, declares, "I suppose it up to North American country now." Peter is aware of that they need already been discovered because a fawn spotter has already reported seeing a Telmarine cavalry scout seem shortly at the sting of the woods then ride off. Peter then outlines his plan, to attack the Telmarine castle, whereas the troops unremarkably guarding it are out searching for them or getting ready to maneuver against Aslan. How Caspian protests, spoken communication that nobody has ever with success captured the castle, which they got to hold out wherever they are. Peter can have none of it. "This isn't a fortress, it a tomb," he says, and might as simply say that one doesn't stand up to besieging while not hope of a relief army, which the simplest defense is offense. Lucy is the only voice of reason. They got to look for Aslan, instead of basic cognitive process that the sole alternatives are dying here, or dying there. Sadly, the huge raid on the castle ends badly. Caspian is ready to rescue Dr. Cornelius, his previous professor, but then wastes crucial time in Miraz and his spouse over the death of his father. Miraz candidly admits his role in killing King Caspian IX, a revelation that embarrasses him ahead of Prunaprismia, but that doesn't mitigate Caspian's failure to open the castle gate at a vital time. Result: half the invasive force finally ends up killed, at bay and helpless and dying underneath a hail of bow bolts, whereas the opposite half will solely watch, unable to help before they have to get away themselves. Glenstorm, in particular, sees a minimum of half his sons killed within the action, and should break this terrible news to his spouse once Peter and Caspian battered forces come to the how. Lucy alone doesn't participate in the invasion, and is obtainable to administer her powerful healthful cordial to the wounded. However, Peter and Caspian get into a bitter argument regarding unsuccessful plans, and whether or not Telmarines have any rightful place in Narnia at all. Edmund is the solely one who will stop Peter and Caspian from killing one another in a duel at the very gate of Aslanhau. As Miraz currently has himself crowned king and accepts multiple troop pledges from the varied social organization Lords of Baruna, Tashbaan, Edinsmore, and also the island of Galma. Nikabrik suggests to Caspian that he place his trust in another, a lot of ancient power that after unbroken Aslan himself at bay. He introduces Caspian to a werewolf and a hag, who inform him that they need between them reserves of endurance and hate that none can match, and may guarantee Miraz's death, and more. The hag then yield to draw a circle together with her overgrown fingernail, so lengthen what appearance like the broken off half a crystal scepter, whereas intonation a harsh-sounding mantra. She then raises her voice and plants the scepter on one fringe of the circle, whereat an icy block forms in midair, and within the block seems none then again Jadis, the traditional and long-dead white witch. She then raises her voice and plants the scepter on one fringe of the circle, whereat an icy block forms in midair, and within the block seems none then again Jadis, the traditional and long-dead white witch. "One drop of Adam blood, and you free me, so I'm yours, my king," says Jadis, with all the seductiveness she can muster. Nikabrik and also the mythical creature then lay hold of Caspian, and the hag slashes his left palm to force him to contribute the blood. Suddenly Peter, Lucy, Edmund, and Trumpkin arrive and fight with Nikabrik, the werewolf, and also the hag. Nikabrik nearly kills Lucy before Trumpkin kills him. Edmund acquits himself better of all, by drawing the werewolf away and killing it with one slash. Peter shoves Caspian aside and confronts Jadis, and that's a mistake. As a result of Peter is currently within the circle. Jadis turns her charm on Peter, saying, "You grasp you will try this alone." Before Peter can succumb to her charms himself, the icy stone cracks, then shatters. Then Peter beholds Edmund, who has injured the block together with his sword. Edmund waits many seconds for Peter to give thanks, him a factor that Peter has ne'er created a habit of doing, and finally says, "I know, you had it sorted." At last Peter realizes however mistaken he has been, and eventually accepts Lucy's insistence that she will be able to acknowledge Aslan and notice him again. He complains that Aslan need to have offered him proof, and Lucy suggests that maybe Aslan was looking forward to the Pevensies to prove themselves to him. Miraz's troops cross the now completed bridge over the Good River, and make the How, hundreds of them, with 4 trebuchets in tow. Currently Peter announces his next plan, to send Susan and Lucy to ride deep into the unsteady wood to hunt Aslan. As a result of solely Aslan will facilitate them now. Caspian then advises Peter that Miraz has an added weakness. As king, he should satisfy the traditions and expectations of his people. One in every of them deciding a battle by single combat might obtain them some time. Accordingly, Edmund, wearing his original royal armor, walks with boldness to Miraz's camp and delivers a written challenge from Peter to Miraz to interact him in single combat. Miraz's lords, employing a very little and excessive amount of charm, counsel that Miraz is within his rights to refuse. Miraz is inclined to try to do something, but because he won't back off ahead of those men. This, of course, is strictly what Lord Sepespian wants, an indisputable fact that Miraz, on the occasion of the duel, clearly recognizes. Susan and Lucy depart, astraddle Caspian devoted war charger. Caspian offers to convey Susan back her ivory horn, however Susan declines, saying, "You would possibly ought to decision American state again." As Peter and Miraz have interaction each other among some ruins outside the How, Susan and Lucy ride part way into the woods. Then Susan sends Lucy on alone, and turns to fulfill a Telmarine patrol together with her bow and arrows. Susan kills 3 Telmarines and risks dying anyway once Caspian shows up at the last minute, rescues her, and brings her back to the How. Peter and Miraz manage to bloody one another, so Peter asks for 5 minutes respite, of that Miraz grants 3. Peter and Edmund have an opportunity to create up for lost time, and Susan assures them that Lucy got through, with a bit facilitate from Caspian. Miraz, for his part, is irritated with Sepespian for not intervening earlier within the fight, a extremely banned issue that Miraz had asked Sepespian to do, however, which Sepespian is averse to do, though not for any honorable reason. The two leaders clash once again, and Peter finally defeats Miraz. Instead of killing him outright, Peter hands his blade over to Caspian, oral communication that Miraz's life isn't his to take. Caspian is keening to spare Miraz, however will fork up the sovereignty back to the Narnians. However, Sepespian kills Miraz, victimization 1 in every of Susan's red arrows, and cries treachery. This causes the Telmarines to launch a complete assault on the How. Glazelle orders a cavalry charge, whereas the artillerymen begin a non-stop barrage with their mechanized trebuchets. The Narnian forces manage to delay the Telmarines by undermining the bottom under their horse hooves. So having a contingent of archers shoot a hail of arrows on the enemy cavalry when they fall under the natural depression they need created, while Caspian and Glenstorm lead a cavalry charge into the Telmarines' rear. Then Sepespian sends in his infantry, and also the defeat of the Narnians appears inevitable, particularly after the artillerymen send their boulders unmitigated into the gate of the How, sealing it. However, Lucy is ready to urge into the wood shut enough for Aslan to satisfy Lucy and pounce on another following Telmarine patrol. "And currently I feel your friends have slept long enough. Don't you?" Aslan asks, and with a roar, he awakens the trees of Narnia from their 1300-year slumber, and so, at the last instant, Caspian has fallen into the sinkhole, wherever Glazelle, pike in hand, is on the brink of impale him and hesitates. Before he will decide that facet he extremely desires to be on, an animated tree root thrusts itself out of the bottom behind him, picks him up, and pulls him into an overhang, sound him senseless. As Peter helps Caspian back onto ground level, the trees, absolutely animated, walk onto the sphere by their roots and switch the tide of battle. One rock forged by an onager knocks down one tree, which collapses and dies, but then another tree extends a protracted root to topple the onager and crush it. With that, Peter, Caspian, Susan, and Edmund lead a countercharge, and also the Telmarines fall back. Sepespian withdraws his troops to the bridge, thinking that which may prove a additional defendable position. Peter, Caspian, Edmund, and Susan pursue them, of course. Then, at the bridge, Sepespian is stunned to seek out himself confronted, initial by a little lady, Lucy, armed with nothing over a little dagger, and so by a tall lion, that ambles up to the bridge like he owns the world. Sepespian orders a charge, and then Aslan, taking the life of his enemy for concerning 5 seconds, lets out another roar. This point he awakens the godlike personification of the river, which nearly drowned Sepespian troops and will drown Sepespian himself, when lifting the bridge off its moorings, with Sepespian and his horse still standing on it. When the Telmarine troops surrender their weapons to the Narnians. Aslan and Lucy receive Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Caspian. "Rise, kings and queens of Narnia, all of you," says Aslan, creating clear to a suddenly diffident Caspian that he can well and really be consecutive king of Narnia, on Aslan direct authority. Then the insufficient band of mice bring Reepicheep forward on a litter. Lucy revives Reepicheep together with her medicative cordial, and Reepicheep bows before Aslan before noticing that he has lost his tail. Aslan teases him concerning being too involved about his honor but restores the tail anyway. Once the opposite mice show their disposition to chop off theirs to spare their chief any humiliation, finally Aslan asks Trumpkin to step forward, and roars at him as if to demonstrate that Aslan will of course exist and is certainly somebody to reckon with. Aslan leads Caspian and also the 4 Pevensey children through the Telmarine's capital city, whose inhabitants greet all of them with cheers and garlands, then into the castle, that from currently on will have a so much less gloomy aspect. Subsequently, Caspian calls an assembly of all the Telmarines, and announces that from now on, Narnia or a Narnian Telmarine Federation, which any Telmarines not willing to just accept which will come to the land of our forefathers. However, this is often not the land of Telmar to the west of Narnia. Instead it's an island on our acquainted earth, wherever the Telmarines' ancestors, who were a crew of pirates, were shipwrecked on an island holding a portal to the Narnian world. Glazelle, who has recovered from being dazed at the battle, offers to travel first, followed by the widow Queen Pruna Prismia, associate in nursing her newborn son. After they seem to disappear through the portal that Aslan creates, the opposite Telmarine's specific skepticism, and Reepicheep offers to guide 11 mice through the portal to function an example. That's once Peter announces that he and his siblings can bear the portal, as a result of Caspian should currently take charge. Furthermore, Peter and Susan won't come back to Narnia again, though Edmund and Australopithecus afarensis will. Susan says goodbye to Caspian, language that a romance between them would ne'er have worked, as a result of "I am regarding 1300 years older than you are." Then the 4 step through the portal and notice themselves back on the railway platform of the Strand Underground Station, wherever they board subsequent train. The sole one to supply a regret is Edmund, who realizes that he has left his electrical torch behind in Narnia. What do you think about this movie? Tell us in comment section. If you like, then click the like button and subscribe the channel.